Which country in the world is really the best for driving? In today's video, I'm going to be reacting to Not Just Bikes' video about why the Netherlands is the best country to drive in. So let's just go ahead and find out what he has to say.
The Netherlands is a great place if you don't want to drive. There are lots of areas that are pedestrianized and nearly car-free. Trains are so pervasive and frequent that they work almost like a countrywide metro system. Plus, rail stations have giant bicycle parking garages and high-quality public transit connections to get you to your final destination. And there are bicycle paths almost everywhere. In many cases, cyclists can take the fastest and most direct route to where they're going, while drivers need to take the long way around.
That was true for me too when I went to my high school. If you would bike there, you would be there in 5 minutes at most. And if you would drive, it would definitely take longer.
I get a lot of comments on this channel by people who say that they love cars and would hate to live somewhere like this. But what they don't realize is that driving is awesome in the Netherlands. This summer, I traveled to Canada to visit family, and I did a lot of driving while I was there. After almost 2 years away, it was a real shock to go from the comfortable, civilized driving experience in the Netherlands to driving in Canada. It made me appreciate how good we have it here.
Hold on, there's a place called Fake London in Canada? I didn't know about that.
I'm not the only one who thinks this either. Take for example the YouTube channel Curleem, an American and self-professed car guy who lives in Amsterdam and has made several videos about how much he prefers driving in the Netherlands compared to places like Toronto or his home state of Florida. And yet Florida is a state that is infamous for how car-centric it is and how hostile it is for pedestrians and cyclists. It should be a great place to drive, but it's not.
I mean, I haven't been to Florida yet because I do want to visit at some point. But I must say, of all the other places I've been in the US, because I've been to quite a few places now, because I did a kind of tour around the US with my American boyfriend when we were there. And yeah, I must say, just first of all, the driving in itself, the driving culture, how chaotic it seems over there, was a real shock to me being Dutch. And I had moments where I was driving in the Netherlands where I was like, okay, this is kind of chaotic. But I didn't know that, relatively speaking, that was like nothing, even compared to here in Vietnam, where I am currently. It's even crazier, a lot crazier. So it's all relative, but yeah, it was kind of crazy in America. So the driving, just how people drive, but then also the roads, like some roads were so bad that before I have seen that, or I had seen that, I thought that like the roads in Belgium and Germany, they have some roads that, yeah, aren't the best either. But at that point, I hadn't seen the roads in the US yet. So, which are a lot crazier sometimes. So it's all relative, but yeah.
Further proof is available from Waze, who used to collect data from their platform to determine a driver satisfaction index each year. And they determined that the Netherlands was the best country in the world to be a driver. This doesn't surprise me at all. Driving in the Netherlands is so pleasant. The infrastructure is of high quality and it's in great condition. And in general, traffic is pretty light and flows pretty smoothly. Sure, there's traffic in rush hour, but rush hour is still about an hour. It's not a near constant traffic jam spread throughout the day like in most US and Canadian cities. It's more like a...
Yeah, for how much we Dutch people love to complain, Also about like being in a traffic jam. It's really just we have to consider like if you see the traffic in the US, then you can kind of um, reframe that in your mind because, well, it still stays being annoying if you're in a traffic jam in the Netherlands, but it's like really nothing compared to some US countries,
A
um,
traffic
cities.
hagelslag, lightly sprinkled over the week. And there are clever approaches to temporary traffic conditions on the highway, such as these rush hour lanes that open when necessary, and changing speed limits based on congestion because drivers traveling slower have less space between cars and make better use of the road space. It blows my mind that driving out of town on a long weekend doesn't involve getting stuck in soul-crushing traffic, like it does in almost every other city I've lived in. You'll see lots of caravans and bicycles attached to cars, but otherwise, it's hardly any different than a regular day. I've lived in cities that have a quarter the population of Amsterdam, yet traffic in them is considerably worse. This all comes down to the fundamental truth. There's no solution to traffic congestion except viable alternatives to driving, and most Dutch cities have viable alternatives to driving for many trips, which reduces the number of cars on the road. In many Dutch cities, taking a bicycle is often the fastest way to get somewhere, because cyclists can usually take the shortest and most direct route, while drivers need to take the long way around. You might think that this is bad for drivers, but it's not, because if cycling wasn't faster, many of these people would be in cars, and the streets would be so clogged with traffic that the direct route would be even slower than the indirect route is today.
Yeah, that's interesting because I was gonna say, I was kind of thinking in my head, like, how does that impact the drivers? But yeah, the way he says it, it is good for drivers if the route is longer because then more people will take the bike and in turn it'll be less people in front of you in the car.
In fact, this was the case in Amsterdam in the 1970s. It may seem counterintuitive, but designing to prioritize walking, cycling, and public transit actually works out better for drivers. And, unsurprisingly, the Dutch cities that are the most car-centric also have the worst traffic. One of the things that makes driving here particularly pleasant is the fact that the traffic lights are smarter, so you end up waiting a lot less. I made a video about traffic lights from the point of view of cyclists and pedestrians, but they work better for drivers too. Almost every traffic light in the Netherlands has multiple detection loops. One at the stop line, like in many other countries, but also at least one farther back. This junction has 3 of them.
I didn't even know that. I thought we only had one at the front. Wow. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense then, actually. I was not aware.
This allows the traffic control system to intelligently schedule the stoplights based on the traffic detected from each direction. For example, you will very often see the traffic light turn red just as the last car passes the stop line. This is because the control system uses the farther detection loop to determine that there isn't another car approaching, so it's safe to change the light to red early and let another direction go while there's a gap in traffic.
That's very smart. I had not considered that
It
to be a thing.
also works to turn a light green early if it detects your car or bike is approaching when it's safe to stop traffic in other directions. Another difference is that, in the US and Canada, traffic lights are stupid and go all green in one direction followed by all green in the other direction. But here in the Netherlands, traffic lights work in multiple phases, so there are many different combinations possible for things like dedicated right turns and left turns simultaneously. This not only speeds up waiting times at traffic lights, it also makes turning much less dangerous and stressful because when you have a green arrow, you're almost always clear to turn.
Yeah, because isn't it in the US, I think you can turn like right. Like there's no real designated time for it. I kind of forgot how it really is. But yeah, I think it's different than in the Netherlands, as I've seen, because I think they can still turn at times. Also, the same with like turning left. Sometimes you can turn on right, and it just creates just chaos.
In particular, the left turn across traffic on a stroad is one of the most dangerous and stressful driving maneuvers in the United States and Canada. I almost never need to perform a turn like this in the Netherlands. Speaking of stroads, there are almost none in the Netherlands, as I've talked about in previous videos. This means that when you're on a road, there are very few side streets, driveways, or crossings to slow you down. This has so many benefits that it's hard to list them all. In general, the lack of stroads keeps traffic moving smoothly and, even if the speed limit is lower, your average speed is much higher because there are fewer cars merging in and out and fewer traffic lights. This is something that people don't appreciate enough. Stroads have so many driveways and side streets that require merging into high-speed traffic that some driveways inevitably get traffic buildups from people trying to exit.
Yeah, I'd never really realized that we don't have as many stroads, as they call them.
The solution is to install a traffic light, which is why there are so many traffic lights in most North American cities. In the newest Strong Towns book, Confessions of a Recovering Engineer, author Chuck Marohn measured his average speed at rush hour and found that it was about 16 kilometers per hour. Actually, it was an average of less than 10 miles per hour, but I'm converting everything to metric here because imperial units are stupid. So, despite the roads having a speed limit of 50 kilometers per hour or more, his average speed was less than 16 because of all the traffic lights.
It's crazy.
And this was in a tiny town of only 14,000 people. Incidentally, 16 kilometers an hour is the average speed of a cyclist in Amsterdam, because bicycle routes are designed to avoid traffic lights and to keep cyclists moving. This really shows you how backwards American traffic engineering is when the average speed of a car in a small town in the US is the same as a bicycle in the largest and busiest city in the Netherlands. I had the same experience when driving in my hometown this summer. I was constantly sitting at red lights when I was driving simply because there are so many of them. And if there aren't traffic lights, there are stop signs. So
This is kind of unrelated, but Canada looks a lot more like the US than I thought it would. And I don't know if that's just because of the footage that he's showing, and I guess maybe some other parts look different in Canada, but yeah, this kind of just looks like the US to me.
many stop signs. Instead of designing proper traffic calming, North American traffic engineers just put stop signs everywhere to slow down drivers. I already made a previous video about why I hate stop signs and why they shouldn't be required at all, especially for cyclists. But yeah, it's so nice to drive through the Netherlands and not see any stop signs at all. And the very, very, very few times you see one, it's actually necessary. Of course, there are many intersections with roundabouts too, which is even better. Then there's almost no waiting at all and traffic flows even more efficiently. Though roundabouts can get backed up if there's too much car traffic, so they don't work everywhere. Of course, the Dutch have a solution for that too, which is turbo roundabouts, but they deserve their own video someday. I would gladly take a road with a lower maximum speed limit if that road design means that I achieve a higher average speed, and that is exactly what I experienced driving in the Netherlands. I made a video about speed limits recently, but what's relevant here is that speed limits in the Netherlands mostly make sense. Different streets with different speed limits are designed differently, so you rarely need to check your speed. The speed that feels right on a given street is usually the correct one. When I was driving in my hometown this summer, I was constantly needing to check what the speed limit was, because everything is designed like a giant stroad, yet the speed limit could be anywhere from 40 kilometers an hour to 80 kilometers an hour with no difference in road design.
Yeah, that makes sense. I do feel like in the Netherlands we have maybe, more different road designs. Whereas in the US, or what I'm seeing now of Canada, it all just looks alike a lot more. So it does make sense that um, it's easier to adhere to the speed limit, or at least know the speed limit, because I do agree on some roads in the Netherlands, you just feel that, yeah, if you would go faster, which is not really, it doesn't feel right. It doesn't really, it feels too fast. So I agree.
Another factor that makes driving in the Netherlands less stressful is that the drivers themselves are better. There are many aspects of this, such as stricter licensing requirements, but I believe the single most important factor is that in most Dutch cities, there are viable alternatives to driving. This means that the only people who are driving are those people who want to drive or those people who need to drive. Most people who live in a Dutch city can make many trips by walking, cycling, or public transit. Even if somebody drives to work, they may still get their grocery shopping by bicycle, walk to a doctor's appointment, or take public transportation to a football game. In particular, shopping by bicycle or by walking is a very low stress activity, and it's usually done when you're on the way home from somewhere else, so it doesn't even feel like a chore. In car-dependent places, you need to drive for everything, so even the most trivial of errands like buying a bag of milk feels like a trip. Not only does this result in a huge amount of excess cars on the road, contributing to more traffic, it also just sucks to do. It sucks to have to get in your car and drive in traffic to do normal everyday tasks like going to an appointment or feeding your family.
Yeah, that sounds quite miserable if every time you would go to the grocery store, you would be stuck in traffic. And maybe it's not like that you're stuck in traffic every time, but I can imagine it takes a lot longer to do your groceries.
Some people may like cars, but driving in this traffic is not fun. So when you get a whole city of people who are forced to do something that sucks every single day, you get a lot of pissed off people on the road. That's not to say that there are no assholes on the road here in the Netherlands. I mean, they sell a lot of Audis here too. But there simply isn't the same level of angry, distracted, or bored drivers that you have to contend with in a car-dependent city. This contributes so much to making the driving experience more pleasant here. And this is even more noticeable when walking or cycling because you're not dealing with hyper-aggressive impatient jerks every time you encounter a car. Of course, it also helps that conflicts between drivers and cyclists are kept to a minimum in the Netherlands, either with protected bicycle paths or by providing totally separate routes for bicycles.
Yeah, that's, in my opinion, a really nice thing in the Netherlands, is that you have a separate road for biking. Not all times, but a lot of the times they do. Which I also saw in Valencia, and in Valencia it was even more separate in a way, because you would have the road for the cars, then cars, like parking spaces, I think, if I remember correctly, and then you had the bicycle lane on the other side. So it would be bicycle lane, then parking, and then the car road. So that helps a lot to minimize those accidents. And sometimes or a lot of times actually, in the US, you would be on the same road as the car drivers, and it didn't feel very safe to be biking there, especially when the cars could go really fast, or a lot faster than a bike would. It just didn't feel safe to just bike on the same road as they did,
This also makes it less stressful
as they drove.
to drive because despite there being so many cyclists in the Netherlands, I find it much easier to avoid people on bicycles when I'm driving. Most people want to avoid hitting pedestrians and cyclists unless you're a pickup driver in Houston or something. So having fewer points of conflict with people outside of cars makes driving easier. Another thing that makes driving great in the Netherlands is that the road infrastructure is of extremely high quality and it's exquisitely maintained. Seriously, I've been living in the Netherlands for 3 years now, and this is the only bad pothole I've ever seen. It was
Yeah, you don't realize this. Again, I know I'm saying this again, but you just don't realize it that the roads are so good in the Netherlands until you've been somewhere that the roads were like horrible, or just worse than in the Netherlands. And that's actually in a lot of places they're worse. I'm not just saying that because I'm from the Netherlands, but it's just a fact. Um, because you already notice it when you go across the border to Belgium or Germany. But they're not that bad in comparison to some of the roads in the US. So it's then when I visited the US that I really was like, wow, the roads in the Netherlands are actually really good. And then you realize that. So again, that's what I like about traveling, or one thing I like about traveling, and just also when you watch videos like this, that you realize that. And then you can actually be more grateful for the things that you already have in your life that are good. Um, yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
So notable that I went home to get my camera to film it. This blows my mind. There's a lot of myths about where
Especially because Dutch people like to complain so much. But then you realize there's actually not that much to complain about. And sure, you can still complain about those few potholes in the road to make it better. But I think it's still good to be aware that we actually don't have it that bad compared to some places.
potholes come from, but when you boil it all down, they're caused by two things: lots of heavy vehicles and insufficient maintenance. The formation of potholes can be sped up a lot by freeze-thaw cycles, but this only happens if water is allowed to enter cracks in the asphalt or if there is poor drainage of the road. If cracks are filled promptly and water is not allowed to penetrate, then potholes are much less likely to form. Look at any list online of the worst roads in America and you'll see sunny places like Honolulu, Los Angeles, and Baton Rouge right alongside New York, Cleveland, and Philadelphia. The fact is, when your city is built only for cars and trucks, you're going to have a lot more car and truck traffic. And as Strongtowns has taught us, if your city is made up of sprawling car-dependent infrastructure, then it's not capable of financially sustaining itself. This is ultimately the real reason why the roads are in such poor condition in many other cities. There's just too much asphalt and stormwater management infrastructure per person to properly maintain it all. This leads to the sad irony.
That makes sense.
Designing your city only for cars makes the roads worse for drivers. And then there's the issue of tax. Drivers simply do not pay the full cost of the roads, period. This is especially true in the United States, where the federal gas tax has been the same since 1993 at 18.4 cents per gallon, while the number of miles of asphalt and construction costs have skyrocketed. But that's a larger topic that deserves its own video someday. And finally, driving in the Netherlands just looks nicer too. You wouldn't think it makes a big difference, but it does. It's so much nicer to drive along a road like this than a stroad like this. This is like the origin of the parkway concept. Just as people like taking walks in parks, mid-century traffic engineers thought that people would enjoy going on drives along parkways. So many parkways were created in the US and Canada as a place for leisure driving. Of course, due to induced demand, those parkways became more like parking lots. Trust me, I did not enjoy taking the Don Valley Parkway to work every day. I don't particularly like cars, and I treat them like any other kind of tool. Car enthusiasts are really bizarre to me because it's like being a power saw enthusiast. I mean, yeah, they're pretty cool, but I really don't care about them unless I need to cut some wood. Now, power washers, on the other hand, are something I could get into. So if the Netherlands can make someone like me appreciate driving, then it's really impressive. Though I must admit that my favorite part of driving in the Netherlands is when I park the car and get back on my bike. Because what's even better than driving in the Netherlands is cycling here.
I must agree with him. I'm definitely more of a biking fan than a driving in my car fan. And like he said, that kind of makes sense because it's so well constructed for biking, but for all different modes of transportation, if you will. Now I'm curious, what's your favorite mode of transportation, and what do you think is the best driving city or country in the world? Let me know in the comments below.